Lots of food and soft drinks.
So tell me when did Phil start telling you about his past and his work?
It was soon after. He kept saying that he had to take Dilantin to prevent seizures. But I noticed when he took Dilantin, he would have a seizure. It was the other way around. It was actually killing him. And it was disrupting him emotionally, physically, so much that he didn't have much of a memory of anything in his past. And then after we were married, he got really good medical care. It slowly started to come back. I mean, it was like, he would even say to me, gee, I hope you don't think I'm like lying because I'm just remembering this, but wow, these things start coming up and I just suddenly remember what's really happened. But that's really when it started. When Oscar died, it might have been 94, Philip went down into his basement, found the file cabinet full of stuff that was just unbelievable. And he showed me most of that. I mean, I saw the original envelopes with the original paperwork that had the drawings on it. I saw the original photographs with the stamps on the back from the Navy. I mean, it was all real stuff. This was not faked. He shared so much with me, even though we were divorced at the time. So I saw all this stuff that came out of the file cabinet. But he'd been talking to Ron about it a lot. They were doing a little alien magazine, a little digest. And then his dad died and he found all this stuff in the basement. Well, Ron was murdered that same year. And that infuriated him. As Philip grew up, he went to Lincoln High School here in Portland, because I have a transcript of his senior high school. So that was pretty normal, except it does indicate on that transcript that he had an IQ of 163. Now, I know Philip told me that before he had his medical issues, he could speak 11 languages. And I believe that because he would suddenly, in the middle of the night, sleeping together, he would suddenly start rattling off different languages. So this is all though in his sleep he consciously couldn't remember how to speak those languages, but in his sleep unconsciously he could still connect with some of it.
This is the new one. Good. Now look outside to the left. Can you see two big clouds?
Philip.
First of all, the idea of underground bases and underground civilizations, this is a very old idea in human history. Going back even thousands of years, you've got ancient tribes around the world that have made these claims. We would say it's in their midst, but that there are secret caverns, secret races, secret tribes that exist underground. And really, when one talks about, for example, hollow earth theory, that's a lot of what we're talking about here. Not all hollow earth theorists say that the entire earth is hollow. A lot of them will say that there are just substantial caverns under the ground where there are civilizations that are down there. So that's an old idea. You get it in a lot of ancient European, I think like the Germans have a tradition, Native Americans have this tradition. The Tibetans may have the most extensive tradition of this, for all I know. South America, traditional tribes have this as well. So the idea in the Tibetan tradition, from what I have understood about it, is that there are different races below the surface of the earth, including reptoid or reptilian races that are supposedly from other worlds. I'm not making this up. So that by itself is interesting, and you might ask, why do all of these disparate civilizations have these types of ideas? And I don't have the answer to that. But I can tell that's an old idea.
Dolan goes on to explain the supposed connection between the Nazis and Tibetan Hollow Earth theories.
But what you really get is in the 20th century, where the Nazis and their predecessors, let's call them the Thule Society, which was a kind of a mystical sect that the Nazis really drew a lot out of in forming their own ideology. The Thule Society was very interested in Tibetan myths about openings into the earth. This idea of deep underground tunnels, bases, crisscrossing the world. And since this was a Tibetan idea, we have to assume that the Nazis themselves were familiar with this idea as well.
There's no question that the secret underground bases do exist. And by the way, it's not only the military of the United States or of other countries, who are making these underground and also undersea facilities. Other agencies and organizations do it as well. All that is needed is the requisite will, funding, expert personnel, and technology. In the early to mid-20th century, you had the French, of course, who constructed the so-called Maginot Line in eastern France to guard against German invasion in World War II. There was a military civil engineering organization in the Third Reich called the Todt Organization, and it was named after Fritz Todt. Fritz Todt was a brilliant civil engineer. He was the father of the German Autobahn system. During the World War II period, Adolf Hitler asked Fritz Todt to lend his engineering expertise to the military program of the Third Reich, which he did. He established an engineering agency which was called the Todt Organization. Now, Fritz Todt died in a plane crash in 1942, and one of his deputies named Xaver Dorsch took over control of the agency. I did find a couple of Project Paperclip memos from 1947 that specifically requested Xaver Dorsch by name to be brought to the United States to work on the United States military's underground plant construction program. The American military certainly was well aware of who Xaver Dorsch was and his expertise. In his day, he was probably the preeminent authority on underground base construction, whether in Germany or in the United States.
Ruins have been uncovered in Argentina, but they're not from an ancient civilization. They're reportedly connected with the Nazi regime. According to an article in the New Zealand Herald, a secret bunker was found, which appears to have been planned for members of the Nazi Party to use as a hideout after losing the war and fleeing to South America.
But I've had people tell me that some of the bases are as deep as 10, 12, 14 miles down.
Okay, so if they're 1 mile deep, how would they make that? Like, can you state possibly a piece of technology that you came across in documents you were researching, or?
Oh yes. Since at least the 1950s, the mining and civil engineering industries have had the capability to sink major shafts straight down, 1, even 2 miles or more, and then to tunnel out from the bottom of the shafts, whether for mining purposes or for entry tunnel complexes. Well, the most common form is to use very hard cutting heads on the tunnel boring machines that rotate. It would be like a huge version of the drills used in the petroleum industry and natural gas industry to drill very deep underground boreholes.
I've heard theories of also nuclear-powered drills.
Yes, I cite this technology in my first book. These are called subterranes. Subterranes are nuclear-powered. They use a small fission nuclear reactor. The nuclear reactor is contained within a machine. The research and design was done at Los Alamos National Laboratories back in the 20th century. And there were some patents granted to the research team at Los Alamos. If they are in use, they are being used clandestinely in great secrecy.
Could you also maybe lend to the audience some examples of real underground facilities
The most famous one would be under Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado, which used to be the NORAD headquarters. Now it's a backup NORAD base, but that would be the most famous one. I guess it's appeared in many movies. It is large, it is sophisticated, it is deep. Then you also have the famous FEMA underground base beneath Mount Weather in Northern Virginia. It's run by FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. It's also quite deep, sophisticated, large. There's so-called Site R complex that is the Pentagon's alternate command center, which is underground on the border between Maryland and Pennsylvania. Then, of course, you have the well-known Area 51 facility. There's been quite a lot of underground tunneling excavation done there. Many people have spoken about facilities out there.
Yes, sir.
Let's go back to that so-called Area 51, because in people's minds, when you say I can't talk about it because it's classified, conjures up, oh, there it is. There's the cover-up. Can you give us any hint, without violating any sense of a confidential nature, what kinds of things might be happening?
Sir, I cannot. Forgive me. I just do not know.
Is there anyone in the Air Force that can?
I'm going to have to defer that to public affairs. It's outside of my area of expertise.
Do you believe in UFOs?
Personally, no, sir.
Why not?
Ma'am, I have no reason to believe that they're real.
And then there are other ones that are perhaps less well known. The NSA in Laurel, Maryland, which is at Fort Meade. Fort Meade is an armed facility, but the NSA is actually the major activity there. And there are just literal acres, multiple acres of supercomputers beneath Fort Meade that go down and down and down. I've been told 20 levels, maybe more. And then Los Alamos National Lab in northern New Mexico. Then you have Camp David in Maryland. Many people are familiar with Camp David as a United States presidential retreat where presidents often helicopter to for rest and relaxation. But less commonly known is that there is a massive underground facility that spreads out for miles. In the run-up to the first war against Iraq, Bechtel built 3 deeply buried, sophisticated underground facilities in Saudi Arabia. They were used during the war, the first war. Stormy Norman Schwarzkopf, who was the American military commander, has spent most of that war underground in Saudi Arabia. And the Chinese, it has come to light that the Chinese have constructed something like 3,000 miles of underground tunnels to house their nuclear arsenal.
What's the benefit of building all of these bases in and around the world? What is it for? Is it for keeping things secret? And what are they keeping secret? Is it for keeping things away from the public? Is it also for protection in some way? Could you elaborate on that?
Yes to all of that. All of those are considerations. The motivation for going deep underground and or deep undersea is often driven by concerns of security and secrecy. Weapons production and storage happens underground, whether for nuclear weapons or other kinds. This has been going on ever since the World War II period.
It looks almost like a scene from an action movie. Dozens of ballistic missile launching systems inside a gigantic cave. But the video shows Iran's missile program is very real and very big, as the head of the Elite Revolutionary Guard's Aerospace Division says. The missiles in various ranges are mounted on launchers in all bases and are ready to be launched, he told an Iranian state TV reporter, and added, that is, if enemies make a mistake.
You also have scientific research facilities underground. The CERN Super Collider on the border of Switzerland and France would be a good example. That one is very much publicly known and discussed. There are other underground research facilities, including at Area 51 and elsewhere, that operate much more out of the public eye. There are many rumors about clandestine extraterrestrial facilities, both underground and undersea. And a growing number of people have come forward over the years with anecdotal accounts of having seen and or been taken into such facilities by a variety of reasons, both by extraterrestrials and also by shadowy elements of the United States military, by clandestine units. I do take these stories seriously. I do believe that these types of facilities exist. What are the reasons that they would be here in underground? Again, for secrecy, for security, and for purposes of communication, command, and control. The same reasons that the United States military builds underground bases.
Secrecy, how corporations and military rule the underworld.
I spent years going through reams of technical documentation from the military-industrial complex, and Morrison Knudsen is one of those that would pop up in the bibliographies. Companies like Parsons, Brinkerhoff, Clay & Douglas, Hewitt, Black & Vetch. Of course, you have the two military agencies, the Army Corps of Engineers, which is definitely involved in constructing underground bases and tunnels. It has been for more than half a century. You also have the U.S. Navy Seabees, who also work in underground and undersea construction. Those would be two of the lead military agencies, but there are large corporations that are involved. The Bechtel Corporation is one. Then you have the tunnel boring machine companies such as the Robbins Company. A number of these companies, which for decades have worked very closely with not only the United States military agencies, but also other agencies in construction of underground facilities and tunnels. These are massive undertakings, and to do that, you need to have large organizations with a bureaucratic and administrative structure that's capable of supporting projects like this. You won't easily find this stuff on the internet. I've found these documents by going to federal document repositories at major university libraries in the United States and also to federal agency document repositories. With these corporations, it's like a shell game, and it's harder and harder to find out who is working for whom and what they're doing and under what conditions. The so-called Morrison Knudsen is now owned by something called URS as of 2007. So you see, it makes it hard to follow what they're doing and to follow the money and the contracts, because the names in the corporate alliances are constantly changing in a state of flux at a very high level.
Now, these mega bases are gobbling up our gross national product. Right now, we're spending 28% of the gross national product on building underground bases solely. That doesn't count for the defense budget. That doesn't count for the spare parts budget. And the black budget is dead wrong. It sidesteps the United States Congress and its Constitution of its people and says you're a bunch of morons you don't need to know. Now, all this alien thing is fine, except for one thing. Alien takeover is a serious threat. Kept totally out of the public view, off the surface, I'm sure the underground bases, without question, are being used as a place to house alien takeover. Alien takeover means the implementation of a one-world government. Direct opposite of constitutional law. Direct opposite of freedom of choice, freedom of religion, other freedoms that go with it. Right to bear arms. If we allow another election to go by with the same ilk in the White House, we have only ourselves to blame.
Well, one question that arises is whether or not there is the legendary, much talked about deal between human government groups and non-humans, the human-alien deal. You know, all I can say at this point is that anything is possible. I do believe that there are a number of other beings that are here. So if that is possible, is it then possible that such a deal went wrong? For example, what would the deal have included? It could have included we humans getting certain technologies and knowledge from them in exchange for them having the ability to do certain things in our society without us giving them acid for it. For them having a permanent base somewhere, maybe in Nevada. For them every now and then taking a human being to examine them but then returning them. This is the claim of the human alien deal. And the claim, furthermore, is that we learned during the 70s and 80s that they were not abiding by their agreement, that they were taking humans, not telling us, not telling the human government, and so forth. None of this, I have any idea if this is true or not. I have no idea. What I would say is that it would very much be in the interest of a visiting race to make a deal with the U.S. government. Why not? Sure, they might be able to wipe us out if they felt like it, but maybe that's too much of a hassle for them. Maybe it's just a lot easier to deal with the local governing power. And so it would make sense to make an arrangement with the local strongman, which would be the U.S. military, U.S. government. And if you really want to get, subterranean here, so to speak, there would be a lot of benefit from a visiting race of extraterrestrials to exploit Earth and humanity to the max. A lot of folks in this field believe that any visiting ET race would, by their nature, be peaceful and nonviolent. I never agreed with this. I don't understand at all why, just because you have better technology, then that means you're nicer. You can be just as exploitative. Look at human history. We've got great technology these days. It doesn't mean we're any less exploitative than people were 5,000 years ago. Well, look, if you come from someplace that's not here, it really makes sense, doesn't it, to create a secure environment for yourself, probably under the ground. It's the best place to be. All the features of planet Earth are suitable for human beings. They may not be as suitable for some other type of species that didn't come from here. When I go through the various witness reports, alleged reports of encounters that people have had with these other entities, that also reinforces my opinion that we're dealing with multiple groups. So at this point in the game, my working assumption is that humanity right now is interacting really on a covert basis with multiple highly intelligent non-human groups that are here. And they're here for purposes that might very well be quite varied. It's not necessarily the case that they all have one agenda. Now, some of these groups, some of these entities, according to, again, witness accounts, are like the prototypical Greys, that is the short, humanoid, large black eyes, big head. Another type of non-human that's been discussed are reptoid types, that is, large, kind of intimidating reptilian creatures. Yet another type that's been reported are what we might call mantid or insectoid type creatures. All of this is bizarre, but yet these reports are consistent across many, many years and many different types of people, some who are utterly ignorant of the lore or of the literature about this, and they still report these, ordinary people. So that gives me pause. That makes me really wonder if these reports are consistent with some of the more ancient myths that people have reported back in earlier times.
Deep underground military bases. Extraterrestrials living beneath Earth's surface. A race that might not even be from another planet, but rather one that has existed here, in the shadows, throughout mankind's entire development. Is this the biggest cover-up in our history? Or just another conspiracy theory? In 2017, we still have no definitive proof that any of these claims are true, which is all the more reason why this just might be one of the greatest journalistic responsibilities of our time.
And I'm not asking you to believe me in toto. I am asking you to seriously do enough homework that you can go out in through the public record, through the congressional records, find out who's voting for what, and go from there. Do your own program, do your own agenda, and do your own speaking out. And if enough of us do this, there is some saving grace.